it for y'all next time. I just didn't have time to put it together. I got something for y'all. But
Okay.
y'all think that's what's smart.
That sounds like a threat.
Yeah.
Anywho, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. I am here hanging out in Muskogee territory, which is also known as the stolen land of Atlanta, Georgia, with my sister colleagues. Today, we got my sister friend, Estee Nena Dillard, who is a Reverend and Olokun priest. He is a brand spanking new initiate in the Egungun or Ancestral Society, and she's a queer sexologist. Thank you, Reverend Estee, for coming. Then right next to her, I got my sister friend all the way in California, which I am always feeling blessed because she wakes up early in the morning to be able to have this conversation with us. She is a writer, she's a journalist, she's a social commentator, and she is up on all things that are Black. My sister Thandisizwe Chimurenga.
I try to be.
Thandi.
Hey.
And then next to her is an anthropologist. She is the owner of Grand Tressa Natural Hair Products. Her hair always looking fly. My sister girl, Nozibele Kuumba. I was gonna say my aunt. That's not it. 50 million other names. Waithe, hey, sis, how you doing?
Hey, peace, everyone.
And then always, like I said, the person that makes sure that we stay in our lane because we are not historians, because she is our resident historian, Dr. Kenja McCray. What's up, Njamile?
Black women gonna have roles and they're gonna have names. Yes, we are.
We're gonna have, yes, many a roles. Dr. Vereen Shepherd, one of the things she talks about is having a bunch of different galas. Like, so you just change your galas out for a bunch of different things. And I was like, that's what Black women do. So I got to keep up with all the names and keep up with all the roles that we do. Right. So, sister friends, I wanted us to talk today a little bit about overall how we're personally coping, and then think about this from a broader perspective, particularly in terms of our field, because there's been a lot of stuff that's been going on. I mean, I think there's constantly stuff going on in the lives of African people, but recently we know that, I'm trying not to say his name, the young, at the time he was 17 years old, murdered folks up there, Cal Rittenhouse, and he got off for killing people in supposed self-defense. So those weren't African people, but they were out there marching for Black Lives Matter and trying to help people. And he went out there and shot and killed folks, even with the support of his mother out there. And so looking at the trial, the jurors being predominantly white, and then coming back down here to Georgia and looking at the killers of Ahmaud Arbery on the other end, a predominantly white jury, only one Black juror, but still those killers were actually found guilty on the charges. And then when we look at the situation in Virginia, we see, I think it was a $26 million settlement against the white supremacists that did the rally in Virginia. So there's lots of stuff that's going on in the world right now. And I'm just wondering, for yourselves personally, how are you coping with all of this stuff that's coming in through the media?
Wow.
Let's go first.
I guess I'll go first. I think for me, one of the ways that I cope is by not coping. I think like most people, I rely on accounts of what's going on from other parties, second and third parties, because for me, sometimes a lot of the things become overwhelming, and it's hard to kind of figure out where to start, because it's so much as an activist, as a Black woman, as a mother, all of those things that you want to do and try to change. And at this point, like my girlfriend was saying yesterday about some of the things that are happening in Africa, is that there are so many things to change, and I'm just one person. So how do you start, or where do you start? So I usually get my information through other people, unfortunately, but that's how I have to cope.
I don't think that's an unfortunate thing. I think that's self-protective. What about the rest of y'all? How do you do it?
I think I make sure I give myself breaks, so I don't feel obligated to stay glued to the news, whatever I'm reading, whether it's local news or what I'm watching, listening to Georgia Public Broadcasting or what have you. I don't feel the need to stay glued to it all the time. And I make sure I'm conscious about giving myself a break to take a walk, or just to look at Black Joy or something, just generally silly or funny, and to connect with family.
Estee, how do you do it?
Well, I live the life that I profess. So for me, I have to start from a place of ancestral work, because I think if there's anybody, and I do mean them in a way that I talk about and experience them to be alive and active energies in this plane. If there's anybody that understands the discomfort, there's a way that this shit is just strange, right? Like, it's strange that a person can pick up a rifle, a child can pick up a rifle and go across state lines and kill people and then cry and be like, I didn't mean to, it's disorienting. It's unsettling. And the same with Ahmaud Arbery, to be minding his good business and
good Black business.
Yes. Right. I was trying not to cuss again. Because what I had was a 4-letter word. But and to be hunted down, it's really unsettling and strange. And so if anybody understands that, it's our ancestors. So for me, my first place of coping is literally to go to the altar and to grieve, because we have to acknowledge the loss that all of us experience, no matter how adjacent or close we are to these particular people. It's still a violent experience for Black people, because we know it's not about it being Ahmaud. It could very easily have been Estee. And that this is a historical violence that we experience across the continuum of the diaspora, because it's institutionalized, right? So we also relive and vicariously are traumatized by what we're experiencing in our siblings and what we watch on TV. So for me, I have to have that sacred time in the sacred part of my home, in this where I just hold space for communing with those ancestors, because I know they understand, because I know that they have the capacity to hold me up, to pour back into me spiritually, as I am trying to process and relieve myself of the weight that it is to be Black, when you're having to watch this on trial, when you're sending money or standing outside protesting or not, or going to work and thinking about it and hearing about it on the radio, because it impacts all of us. So I think that's where it starts for me. And I think the other thing for me is in creating just community around whatever I need. I'm a person I'm an extrovert, I'm a processor. So like, I need to call people and cuss and yell and fuss and and be like, can you like, I know I need that space. That's healing for me. That helps me to not hold it. As an empath, I go outside and I feel things. Well, actually, I ain't got to go outside. I just got to wake up. So I have to be able to allow those things to come through my body and not just be held up in my body. And it just helps to have safe space to call the folks that you know, text the folks, group chat the folks that I know are going to be able to hold my truth. So those are the two primary things for me.
That's really interesting that you say that. I have some thoughts, but I want to, Sister Thandi, I really want to hear from you because I know you covered the trial of Renisha McBride. That I don't know, it seems like it's about a decade ago now at this point. I'm not sure about how long ago it was.
That was in 2014.
Oh wow! It just because I think there's so much traumatic things that's happening. I thought it was 10 years ago, but okay. So you covered that trial in 2014. How did you sit in that courtroom?
And before that, I covered the trial of Oscar Grant's murder in 2010 in Los Angeles. Yeah.
And I remember, I think I shared this with you. I had not seen the murder of Oscar Grant, and I was in a workshop that was supposed to be a healing workshop, and it was not healing. Because one of the things that the facilitator did in a group of Black people was show the murder of Oscar Grant. And there was a audible gasp because that was, so you remember, if you think about technology and smartphones, that was a newer thing at that time. So we weren't seeing that, really kind of before, like you can kind of go back to like Rodney King and then Oscar Grant. It's almost like that. And so to see that, I mean, I was traumatized by that. And
it was very traumatizing.
How did you get through those two trials?
So the Oscar Grant trial was first. Like you said, we saw that video, which was, at the time, like you said, that technology or seeing something like that, capturing it was kind of new. And at the time, I thought everybody needs to see this, even though it's jarring, it's traumatizing. It was like, I can't believe this. Do you see this? And so I covered the trial, and then I wrote the book, No Doubt, The Murders of Oscar Grant, which is based on the trial. And I wrote that first chapter, I hope, I've been told, in such a way that if you had never seen the video, you have now just seen the video. I tried to recreate it because you need to see that. I couldn't believe it. Now I'm at the point where I don't share those types of videos of our murder, of our brutalization. I try not to look at them. I tried as hard as I could not to look at the video of Ahmaud Arbery, but I eventually took a peek at it. So, the Oscar Grant's murdered January 1st, 2009. The trial starts in July of 2010. And it wasn't until we were in the trial, there was organizing going on in the community because the murder happened in Oakland and they were going to transfer it to LA. And people were like, we got to watch this case. We can't let this go. And so much going on. And it wasn't until we were into the trial that I realized I had not mourned Oscar. And I mourned him. I mourned some other people who had been murdered. I called it, I wrote a piece on it. It's called, I Had a Good Cry Last Night. And I cried for the brothers who were with him on the platform, his boys, his homies who witnessed that. I just had to it was like a purging. And so when Estee talks about that, thank you. Yes. Whether it's collective grief or individual, we got to let it out. We have to let it out. That's why I call it a good cry. I had an elder tell me years ago, she said, sometimes you can see further through a tear than you can through a telescope. And I always remember that. You get it out. You got to get it out. Same thing with Renisha McBride. Renisha McBride was murdered in, I believe, November 2013. And was it January? It was at some point in early 2014, I was like, I got to go to this trial because I heard the Renisha McBride in Detroit, Michigan. She goes out one night. She gets in a car accident. She's trying to get home. She knocks on this guy's door, and he claims that he thinks someone's trying to break in. He opens the door, and he shoots her in the face with a sawed-off shotgun. She's a 19-year-old. I'm going to say child. Because I'm like, your brain doesn't stop developing until you're the age of 25. That's why people are classified as children. She's a teenager. He shoots this child in the face. And, my lawyer friends, they talk to me about the law so that I can get a better understanding. It's still psychopathic when it comes to African people in this country. But, my lawyer friends, they say, well, you get to make an argument in court. And I heard the guy's lawyer one day saying, well, maybe she thought she was breaking into her drug dealer's house. And I was like, I'm going to have to go to this trial. I need to go and witness what they're saying, what they're doing, and I need to come back and tell you about it. And so a few months went by. I said, yeah, I'm going to do this. Started a GoFundMe, was able to raise the money, got plane ticket out there, got my equipment, found a place to stay. And it wasn't until the night before the trial started, I almost had a breakdown. I cried. I almost lost it. And during the trial, the press was situated away from the actual courtroom. Unfortunately, we were watching it on a large TV. So at some point during the trial, they showed a picture of her autopsy photo. We didn't get to see it in the courtroom, in the media room, because it was not shown on the screen. But you could kind of tell what her face looked like, kind of. Her family got up and left the courtroom because they didn't know that was going to be coming. And then, of course, the what's his name? The defense is like, oh my God, we can't have them doing that. It's prejudicial to this. And it's like, so I say all of these things to talk about the fact that, like even with Ahmaud Arbery, we don't find out about this until maybe 2 months later, right? Mm-hmm. We see this video 2 months later. So the immediate crush of the death, we don't have it. There's the anger and the organizing. Where's the justice? Where's the law enforcement? Where's the justice system? We get a trial and we go to these trials and then we are murdered all over again. I feel like it's soul murder. The things that these people say about us in these courtrooms in an attempt to get one person on the jury to think, no big deal. It's what they get. It was their own. And it's just, you have to take a break. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to call up Estee and cuss. If you need to call up Estee and just blubber. Whatever it is you need to do something. Because it can be too much. And even when I was writing the book, going back to the Oscar grant, I decided, and this was 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, I wouldn't do this again. At the time, I was naive. There were just so many. I didn't understand anti-Blackness. I didn't understand the depths of hatred of African people. I didn't understand why there was so much misinformation, so much lying on Oscar Grant. I'm like, well, I've got to document this and I've got to combat this. So I made the decision to wander into, the various social media spaces that were talking about Oscar Grant. And I tried to recreate some of that in the book. During the time that was happening, I had to physically get up from my computer and go and sit on the couch. I had to go turn on the TV. I had to go turn on to Facebook. I had to go put on some 70s R&B and some South African house music. I just had to get away from the computer because I was mad and looking for people. I wanted to go find people. I did not understand that there were people, that they were trolls and that they were intent on misunderstanding and misleading people and providing misinformation and lying. I didn't know any of that. I don't know necessarily that I would take on a project today of attempting to defend someone's character. It was just so much. So yeah, if you need to physically get up and go for a walk, go to the beach, go whatever, turn on some music, either dance it out or just let it chill you out. If you need to cry, if you need to beat a pillow, grit your teeth, If you have an altar or a space where you can go and talk to your ancestors and ask them to hold you up, whatever it is you need to do, because you're going to need to do something, because there's the physical murder. Again, like Estee said, we don't know Ahmad. I ain't never met Oscar Grant in his life. Didn't know Renisha's people, but we know it could have been us or our loved one. We understand collectively it could have been any of us. That is why we grieve. That is why we have collective anger.
Yeah.
And then to go through the murdering again, which is a murder of that individual and us as a community, that's soul murder.
Well, and I'm almost thinking that there's 3 murders that happen: the physical murder of the individual.
Well, I call it the triple murder. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think there's the murder of the person's character. And my thing is, I don't care if somebody was shaking their ass, selling drugs, committing crimes out in the street. We don't live in a country where people get to decide that they're going to kill you like a dog in the street. I can't even say kill you like a dog.
No, we do. We do live in that country.
Yes, but in theory, that is not supposed to happen. That is not supposed to happen where the one individual gets to be the judge and the jury and executioner right in the middle of the street. I don't care what crime a person commits or doesn't commit. So in addition to that, and so for me, the third murder becomes the murder of us, because we see these things in social media over and over again. And I don't know about you, but my blood pressure goes up. I'd be mad.
Stressful. It's stressful. Yeah.
I mean, and
like a quadruple murder. Yeah. Well, I say a quadruple murder because I was saying it's a triple murder. You murder the person, you murder him in the media, then you murder him in the courtroom. But it's also the community gets murdered. So it's a quadruple murder. It's mass murder. It's mass murder.
So genocide. That's what we need to call it. It's genocide. Because if we keep seeing these images over and over again, it stresses people. Your blood pressure goes up, then you're eating more, or you're doing other
smoking more, or drinking more,
or whatever the unproductive things are, having sex with the wrong people at the wrong time, that's putting your health at risk. Whatever it is that you're doing to be able to cope with this level of trauma, then becomes almost like a normal way of life. And so when you see that, the word that you use, which I think is really critically important, that anti-Blackness, that permeates all of this. So even when you see the videos over and over again, I just ignore those things on social media. Now, admittedly, sometimes some little headlines will get me. And even the little headline, when I read that and I'm scrolling past it, I feel the anger in me. And so I think it's important for us to figure out, how do we protect our not just our physical health, but our psychological and spiritual well-being when there is so much anti-Blackness. And when not only is there anti-Blackness, but these folks ain't even changing up what they doing. So, you remember how we was little and we read in the books and they say, oh, they had this jury and it's an all-white jury, or a jury with, it's mostly white people and one Black person. I'm like, y'all motherfuckers ain't even changing what y'all doing. Y'all that sick. And I'm sorry. I know Estee's trying not to cuss, but that's the word. Y'all not even changing. Y'all shut up.
The thing that I think is interesting that I hear over and over and over and over and over again, that these people do it in self-defense. I mean, as an African person, I'm the one that should be scared, right? Because we're the ones that are getting murdered. We're the ones that are getting attacked. We're the ones that are getting brutalized. We are the ones getting raped. If anyone has a self-defense plea or to say self-defense, I think it should be us. So I don't understand how a white man who, despite what they try to claim, is still at the pinnacle of power, right? When you look at white men, they're still up there. No matter what they're trying to say, they're still up there in terms of hierarchy. How can they claim self-defense? How can they claim that they're afraid? That's the thing that just boggles my mind.
Fred
Well, I
Fanon
think-
actually talked about that. It's cognitive dissonance.
Well, see, that's what I disagree with.
Yeah.
I disagree with that because I think that, and there's nothing wrong at looking at something from our eyes. We have to have our own perspective. We have to flip it because we have looked through the white gaze for too long. But I think that there are times when we need to creep back into the white gaze. If you understand white supremacy from their standpoint, everything they're doing makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It makes absolute perfect sense. White supremacy never ever holds itself accountable. It's not responsible for anything. It is pure as the driven snow. It is without blemish. It is innocent. These people call the police on us and then they start to cry. Karen and Ken. Everything that they do makes sense from their point of view.
You can't say Ken. That go Ken over
but
Barbie.
the
You
point-
gotta have
the
Karen
point
over
about
somebody else.
Karen and
But
Ken.
I think it's the danger because from day one we always try to sympathize with European.
No. Not trying to sympathize. I'm not saying we need to sympathize. I'm simply saying that these people, it's like, and I'm not a doctor. I was told I cannot diagnose people. So Dr. Bobby Wright, a psychiatrist in Chicago, calls it the psychopathic racial personality.
Okay.
That whites are psychopathic in how they act toward us. So I didn't say it. This psychologist said it.
Oh no, I'm not saying that you're saying it.
No. What I'm saying is, if we start to understand it from that standpoint, within their psychopathology, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. So we can have logical and reasoned debate if we want to, but psychopath that's in their mind. That's going in one ear and out the other. I'm trying to keep my language plain. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so let me speak up for my lane. So what Dr. Bobby Wright, who died in I think maybe 1984, he was a psychologist and he did write the book. I could pull it out on the shelf. It's the psychopathic racial personality. And what he was essentially talking about is today what we would call antisocial personality disorder. And I think, maybe last year I read the criteria, so I actually pulled it out. So I'll let somebody else talk. And we can talk about the criteria of antisocial personality disorder. It is diagnosed for an individual person, but when we think about the criteria, then what he was trying to say is that racist, white supremacists that have that kind of racist mentality, that criteria also fits them. But and Jamila, you were going to say something.
Oh no, I was agreeing with Thandisizwe. I think Nozibele, we fall short of our analysis, are gauging white supremacy and white supremacists when we forget or lose sight of the fact that white supremacy is it's a slippery thing. It's protean. It's changeable, right? So the power is in the ability to define yourself as you desire. So you can define yourself as both the most powerful person in the scenario and also the victim of this rogue criminal who, no, you don't have proof that they're a criminal, but you don't need it because you're the most powerful person and you're also the victim, right? So I think that's where Thandi was coming from. So it's not slip into the white gaze to empathize or sympathize with them, but really to, I guess, understand in this moment and in the future strategize, right? You got to change vantage points for a second sometimes.
Okay, I got to read y'all this criteria because, like I said, we talked about it before, but let's take a fresh look at this. Okay, so this is the criteria for antisocial personality disorder. First one: failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. That's number two: deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. Number 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. 4, irritability and aggressiveness as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. 5, reckless disregard for the safety of self or others. 6, consistent irresponsibility as indicated by repeated failure to sustain consistent work behavior or honor financial obligations. 7, I think this is the most important, lack of remorse as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. That's antisocial personality disorder. And of those 6 that I just read, you only need 3 of those to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Of the 7 I just read.
6 or 7, yeah. Yeah, 7.
So
okay.
I think the other thing that's important to say too is how religion and religiosity plays a part in this. Just around entitlement and dominion and authority. And I think we can talk, particularly in Black circles, a lot about how we were given slave religion and that the Christianity that we were fed and forced to adopt was altered, but also white people had slave religion as well. So they also were subscribing to these kinds of large theological notions that permeated society and reinforced this sense of entitlement and authority that you were the right one. You know what I mean? Like the audacity to take the premier sacred person like Jesus and then just make them look like you. You know what I'm saying? Like you just gonna make Jesus look like you, like the unmitigated gall. You know what I'm saying? Like
the caucasity.
Yeah,
what do I look like being like Gandhi was a Black woman? It's equally as absurd. You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna put my mama on a picture and put it on the wall and be like, everybody, this is Gandhi. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the same thing.
But it ain't absurd to them.
And that's what I'm saying, because it contributes to this the institution and how white supremacy is a part of what we're experiencing. I just think it's important to name that part too, because if how you understand what is sacred, what is holy, what is divine, what is ruling, so to speak, which is still which is still imperialist language, but what is ruling the cosmos, what's running the universe, as something that you can then co-opt and make your own because of this authority that you have. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that reinforces the things that we see on this list of antisocial personality disorder.
No, I totally agree with you.
Dominion. Yeah.
I mean, and I think just looking at the idea, I was looking at sister that Love Me Fro handle. She said, what did Marimba Ani call it? Say a little bit more. I know.
Yurugu.
Yurugu.
Okay, so she's just talking about the title. Okay, just the concept of Yurugu.
So, and I think it's in terms of, does everyone know Yurugu about it? Should we talk a little bit about Yurugu? Who Yurugu is?
Yes.
And I think that ties into two things. So and I want to kind of take the conversation in this direction. So Nozibele, talk about Yurugu. Let's think about that in terms of what I just said about antisocial personality disorder, and then also tie back in. I think it's important for us to go back to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work from what Thandisizwe was saying, because I think all of those do tie together. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. And people feel free to jump in, because I'm still digesting Yurugu, to be quite honest. I was talking about that last week. But basically, Yurugu is an archetype of personalities. Dr. Marimba Ani, she talked about the different ethnicities of the world and how they came into being. And there is, in Africa, this idea of Yurugu, which is this being that descended from heaven that was so greedy and was so selfish, it ate its mate. Like all the other ethnicities came down. You had people from Africa came down with their women, people from India came down with their women. But on the way down, the people of European descent ate their mate. And because they ate their mate out of greed and consumed, the idea or the premise of Urugu is that they will never be balanced because they don't have that complement. And if you look at it, and the argument that she made is that you can look at how they treat their women, and because of the way that they treat their women, by extension, they treat everyone else, with this unmitigated and insatiable greed. And that's basically Urugu, who Urugu is in a snapshot.
And then
Add-ons.
Go ahead,
Is it treat their mate or hate? Is it treat their mate or hate their mate? I don't forget which one.
Oh, ate, consumed.
Oh no, I mean
so they
ate, but yeah,
ate the not only the physical body but the spiritual, mental, everything of their mate. They totally consumed the mate. So inside of them,
and because of that, they're imbalanced, and that's why they're running around acting crazy. And I also think it's important.
But it's also another thing that I like, and I always fall back on Michael Bradley, Iceman Inheritance. Yeah, and I know this is an old book, but they talked about the way societies and cultures developed and how people in warmer climates, read African people, had a different environment where they had more food and they had things that they were more accessible to, as opposed to people in Europe in a cold climate. They didn't have access to food. They didn't have access to a lot of things. So that made them very competitive and not, want to share and make them very individualistic. So that's a part of that going on too.
And also, I think it's important to remember that Dr. Maremba Ani is a trained anthropologist of decades. So, she didn't just get an idea one day and write a book.
Oh yeah, no. She is an anthropologist.
Because she coined Ma'afa, right?
No.
Well, she didn't coin Ma'afa. No, I thought she did. Who coined Ma'afa?
Go historian.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, that's why I told you you were going to correct us.
Let's look and see.
I thought she did. I thought it wasn't her specifically, but I think out of the people in Nation House, Nzinga Warfield Kopic, I think it was that whole collective that came up with that idea.
Was my understanding that it was her.
And even though she may have not necessarily coined the term, and I also don't think she coined the whole idea behind Ma'afa, but it came out of a collective think tank.
Yeah, so that's why. Well, and I wanted to kind of get
maybe the term, but not the process. That's what I'm saying.
I wanted to kind of get to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work. We know that we just lost her just a few years ago, and she was a trained psychiatrist. And her book, The ISIS Papers, when you look at that, and then you also look at, if you've ever seen any of her lectures, she talks about Brother Neely Fuller and his work. And his book has this long title. It's a very long title. But basically what they're talking about is this idea of, Neely Fuller talks about, if you don't understand racism and white supremacy and how it works and functions, then everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. And that is the thing. I would add to that, kind of in more contemporary languages, if you don't understand anti-Blackness along with that, because it's not just racism and white supremacy, it's specifically anti-Blackness and how that functions. Then when things happen like Ahmaud Arbery being murdered, and like you said, Sister Thandi, we don't find out about it until 2 months later, and the murderers are actually let go, we get surprised by those things. We get surprised
they weren't let go. They weren't
even arrested. I'm sorry. Thank you. That they were never even arrested. And that there was actually a disruption to prevent them from being arrested. If we don't understand racism and white supremacy and don't understand anti-Blackness, then we will be confused when we look at, in 2021, how a jury in Brunswick, Georgia, which is like, I think it's 20-something% Black, could end up with a predominantly white jury. If you don't understand these things, then when these consistent racist attacks happen, then the risk is that your psychological health becomes a target. Like, you really become a target for these things because you get surprised, as opposed to recognizing this is how the system of racism and white supremacy works. This is anti-Blackness at its finest.
You know, one of the things a lot of people are constantly and currently and going over and over, what does anti-Blackness mean exactly? And it's always helpful to me to continue to revisit things. A lot of people have issues with Frank Wilkerson, one of the proponents of anti-Blackness. There are other people out there whose works I'm not familiar with, but for me, through my brother Jared Ball and I Mix What I Like, his media analysis work that he does, when Frank Wilkerson says to me that anti-Blackness, there's a libidinal economy that's operating, something that is even subconscious. And Ifetayo, this needs your help on this. When he talks about anti-Blackness in terms of the absolute utter disregard for Black suffering and Black life, that Black suffering is necessary for the function of white supremacy, and that there's absolutely nothing too horrendous that can happen to Black people.
Right.
When he said that, I was like, God damn. Mm-hmm. It all comes together now. It comes together what Francis Wilson was talking about. Why else would you act this way if you were not afraid of being annihilated? If you did not have an utter, almost paralyzing fear that there's a danger to your existence, otherwise, why are you acting in such a barbaric fashion? You're not just being barbaric just for the hell of it. There's a reason for your barbarity. I need a reason for the barbarity. Some of us don't. I just can't understand it. I need a reason.
I think you have to expand the argument even further. Like I want us to think about people like what's the guy that ran for president against Trump? The Black guy, he just died of COVID.
Herman Cain.
I don't forget his name, Lord.
Herman Cain.
Uh-huh.
So when you think about people like Herman Cain, when you think about what was the tall, skinny guy that was advising Trump, who's Jewish? He's got he done changed his name so it doesn't sound like a Jewish name.
Stevenson.
Talking about Jared Kushner?
Bannon?
No, not Jared. Is it Steve Bannon? No, Bannon is the fat guy, right? Well, I don't know. Anyway, I don't keep up with them people.
Mm-hmm.
The skinny one, y'all, whatever his name is, the skinny one. I remember being surprised. Well, when you think about Jared Kushner, because Jared Kushner's family are survivors of the Jewish Holocaust in Germany and came over to the United States, right? Think about that. When you think about the other guy, and one of y'all that's listening, y'all can help me out with the tall, skinny guy's name. He, when I looked into something, because I was just like, Stephen Miller, thank you. Alethea's watching Alethea. When I looked and I was like, this dude is Jewish and he's doing this. And what you got to understand is that this goes beyond just this idea of whiteness in terms of what we think about it. And that's why I'm saying that you can't just simply say it is just whiteness and white supremacy. It is also a sense of anti-Blackness, because how could these folks that are direct descendants of people that were annihilated by other white folks come to this country and advocate those kinds of hateful policies that killed their people? Other than you totally, completely embrace anti-Blackness, and for you, Anti-Blackness means, or embracing anti-Blackness means that there is nothing that you can do to Black people that is unreasonable. If we are maimed, if we are shot in the back in the street, if we are shot in the face, if our children are kidnapped and raped, none of those things matter, because ultimately we are not perceived as human and worthy of any kind of empathy. So what does that say about? And go ahead.
And it ain't happening to you.
And it's not happening to you.
As long as these people looking at Black folk, they ain't gonna be looking at me.
And so when you even think about that, so for me, I even think about it further. So when I think about it from a global perspective, and I see you, Estee, I think about it from a global perspective when you think about Israel. And I'm like, how the hell did y'all just come out of what all the stuff that y'all people went through, and then you're gonna go to some other land and say, okay, from the Bible, it was my land, and then you start doing the same thing to those people that was done to you?
Never again. Isn't that their motto? Never again.
But
it ain't gonna happen to us. It ain't gonna happen to us.
So but you're gonna do it to somebody else.
It ain't gonna happen to us.
Yeah.
And Estee, what are you gonna say?
I just want to push back on this. Right. Thank you. I just want to push back on this. It's not going to happen to us, Thandi, because I don't think they even conceive it that way. I don't think there's a lens for
just a little bit. Not to the extent that Ifetayo just talked about, but just a little bit. I think that what Ifetayo was just talking about is the main thing, but I also think there's a kernel in there. When you ask specifically about Jewish people, I think there's a kernel of, at least they ain't whooping my ass. I think there's a kernel of that there. Just a kernel, just a little bit. So go ahead.
Maybe, but I think what seems to dominate my experience is that the thought is, if I buy into white supremacy, and if I implement white supremacy in my life, in my institutions, in my allies, in my money, in my bank, in my purchases, and where I buy a home, then even Black folks do this, right? Then I'm not those folks. I'm not those Black people. So I don't even think for some people it occurs to them that it could happen to them, because, and I think that's important, because what happens is we shift the supremacy from having to be on whiteness to the supremacy itself being the objective. And I think that's the place where we have to interrogate how this consciousness gets applied across the board. Because it's like, if I buy the right house in the right neighborhood, and I wear the right clothes, and I get the right job, and I send my children to the right schools, then I can exempt myself from ever being Ahmaud Arbery. Because then you will somehow look at me running down the street for a jog in the morning and know that I paid my taxes in North Georgia. Right. And so I think that those are the places where we have to have honest conversation, because this is even where we lose Black folks. This is where we can lose us, because we'll get committed to just trying to have a supremacy. So if I could just get my piece of the supremacy, I think that happens over and above trying to make sure it's not us.
And that goes back to my comment about this sense of anti-Blackness. And anti-Blackness is not limited to white people being anti-Black. Black people can be anti-Black. Anybody can be anti-Black. And I think that that's the fundamental thing. And Estee, what I think we are realizing now is, we had a group of folks that were raised with respectability politics, and we're finally understanding that it don't matter what you do. My PhD is not going to keep me from being harmed. If somebody looks at me and the only thing that they see is my Black skin, when people look at me, I remember when I first got my PhD, I was all happy. Got my little basket rolling in Whole Foods, and this heifer gonna turn to me and ask me where something is in Whole Foods. I ain't had no Whole Foods shirt on. I had nothing that looked like no uniform.
She asked Dr. You.
Girl, at least some white heifer ain't give you the keys to her car at a fancy resort and tell you to go park it because she think you're a valet. I should have stole that mug.
Okay. Should have drove it to me, something.
I did, before we run out of time, want to think about flipping the script or rearranging the narrative. I'm reading 400 Souls. I don't know if y'all have heard this book, but it's a community history of African Americans. And I read it. This chapter is about Reconstruction, and it's about white terror and white supremacy. And it's really focused on mass terror, white terrorism, but I think this still fits. So it's by the journalist, the writer, Michael Harriot. And you know how, I don't know if you're familiar with his writing, but it's really sardonic and wry and clever. And so what he says is, I'm sorry?
No, I'm just going to say he don't hold no punches. Go ahead.
He doesn't pull punches, right?
Cool.
So he says, he reframes the so-called redemption as the first war on terror, and the resistance to so-called redemption as the first war on terror. And then he says about his chapter, he's going to call it the untold story of the great American race war. And he said, before we begin, we shall introduce our hero. And the hero of this drama is Black people, all Black people. And that, I thought of that when you said we all suffer when this happens to one of us. He says the free Blacks, the uncloaked Maroons, the Black elite, the preachers, the reverends, the doormen and the doctors, the sharecroppers and the soldiers. We are all protagonists in our epic adventure. He says, spoiler alert, the hero of this story does not die. So we framed, what happens to all of us as a murder. But it's interesting, he's on the flip side of it. And he says, we don't die. We don't die ever. We're a hero that is long suffering, and bloody and unbowed. And then at the end, he says, I know you're thinking about, wondering what happened to our hero. Well, the most marvelous, unbelievable thing about Black people in America is that we exist. Every unimaginable monstrosity that evil can conjure has been inflicted on this population, yet they have not been extinguished. Right. The hero remains still, and that is the most wondrous part of all.
Yeah, we still here.
Boom. I love that. I love that.
I love it. That is perfect. I'm gonna get that book.
I love that. And it reminds me of the work that we do every day, that we show up, that the six of us show up here once a month, and we decide that we're going to have these conversations, even when we've got 50 million other things on our lives. We think that it is important enough to be able to do this type of work, and that each in our individual lives, that we are all committed to loving on ourselves and loving on Black people, and not seeing ourselves as a tragedy, not seeing ourselves as victims, not seeing ourselves that don't have any power. And I think that is really the key of what you're saying, is that we are all heroes. Our ancestors are all heroes.
Absolutely.
Because if we think about other people that would have gone through a fifth of what our ancestors, or that what we're experiencing right now, they would not have survived. They would not have survived. And the fact is that when we understand racism, when we understand anti-Blackness, when we understand misogynoir, that hatred towards Black women, when we understand these things, then when shit comes up, we're not surprised. When you see in 2021 an all-white jury, or jury that only has one Black person on it, you're like, okay, that's about right. And then you can keep it moving so you can still do your work. That being said, I want to because I know Nozibele's got to go early. So wrap up comments. Let's start with Estee. What do you want to leave everybody with?
Oh, I love this because I was just going to jump in. So I love the reframing, and it actually makes me think of a thought that I had earlier when we were talking about strategy, and I think strategy has to be a holistic approach, and we can't just see our strategies as having to be political or communal or grassroots and organizing, but it has to be things like this intentional reframing, because the truth is we really have done that reframing. We just don't necessarily have that as a part of our meta narrative. But if we think about how we talk about this stuff in our homes, we'll be like, yeah, such and such and so and this and that. And in the by and by, I guess we'll understand because we're going to do this tomorrow. right? So we've always had these tools, but if we could harness these tools a little differently, that too should be as much a part of our strategies as we possibly can make them, and for us to name these strategies that come out of our ancient knowledge, our ancient epistemologies, our embodied epistemologies, and allow that that thing that keeps us going, that thing that lets us know that I might not be safe out here in this evil world, but I know I'm safe with my sisters. I know I'm safe with my mama. I know my grandmama got me even on the other side.
I love it. I love it. Sister Thandisizwe, what's up?
Hide your kids, hide your wife, protect yourself. You got to protect yourself. However, which way that you can protect yourself, whatever that entails. By
any means necessary.
If that means going away from social media, then do that. Turning stuff off, then do that. But definitely, I think that grief and collective grieving is a release, and it's necessary. And we're being assaulted. Yes, we need to reframe. Yes, we're still here, but we're taking hits, and we need to acknowledge when those hits come and do whatever it is that we need to do to regenerate and heal ourselves and continue. This is a process. It's not an event. Like Nipsey say out here in LA, 10 toes down, it's a marathon, right? So we got to stay in this. We in this for the long haul, but you have to take care of yourself during this long haul. Whatever it is that you need to do for yourself, do it.
Nozibele, what are your comments? Takeaways?
My comments, I want to veggie back on what Estee said in terms of how we reclaim our power. Because when you don't name a thing and when you don't define a thing, you can't fight a thing. So it's really important for us to name the things that are going to us and also rename it and change the narrative in a positive way. Because I know a lot of times, when you look at people in the 60s, they talked about the struggle. When you talk about the struggle, you think about, oh my God, I don't want to be out here struggling. So one of the things that a lot of people had took the term to say it's a beautiful struggle, right? It's a powerful struggle. It's an ancestral struggle. It's a spiritual struggle. So we have to rename and reclaim the things that are happening to us so that we can fight it and name it in a positive way. So a beautiful struggle.
Ashe.
I gave my reframing. Yeah, reframing.
I love that. I love you. I was reading in the private comments. I was reading to see what's happening. Thank you, everybody that has been commenting today. We see it as a beautiful conversation going on today. One of the things that I will say, and this will be kind of like a self but overall promotion, is by actively engaging, and that might be in whatever field that you're doing. I happen to be a writer, and so this is Making Black Lives Matter. I will actually post it in our chat. This book is edited by brother Dr. Kevin Coakley. I have a chapter in here that's called Let the Orisha Speak. And I talk about, this is specifically for Black women, and I use concepts of the Orisha to talk about how people can heal in contemporary times by using concepts of the Yoruba Orisha. This book just dropped last month at the beginning of November, and it is free. Like, you can get the electronic version of this book for free online. And
Free?
so, yeah, it's free.
I don't need to pay no money.
You ain't got to pay no money.
Girl, give me that link.
If you want the hard copy, you got to pay for it. But if you want the electronic copy of the book, thank you, Nozibele. The book is free online, so I will post that. And what we are doing at A Healing Paradigm, thanks to all of the authors in the books, is I'm going to be interviewing each one of these authors. And so we're doing a whole workshop series next year talking about confronting anti-Blackness and then creating psychological well-being. Dr. McCray, at the end of the year, she's going to do a workshop where we're going to do an ancestral walk in Savannah, Georgia. So we're going to be doing everything. We're going to have author talks. We're going to, if you want to be in a group that's led by therapists that can help you process stuff around anti-Blackness, if you just need to do some wellness activities, we got all of that stuff for you. And then my sister friends will still be here next year on the first Friday of every month, and we'll be continuing having these conversations. So y'all definitely come back, hang out with us. And I would say, if you have a particular topic that you want us to try to tackle, then put it in the chat. Let us know what you're really interested in, and we will try to do it. Okay. Take care, y'all.
Love y'all.
A bold suggestion.
Bye-bye.